You cannot be a Zulu and a Christian at the same time. This is the claim that we're going to address today, coming from Penuel The Black Pen. This is someone who we have done a number of reaction videos to, and you can check all of those in the comment section, and we're going to pin them for you. But I want to address this claim, and I want you guys to watch the video with me, because with Penuel, for me, it's always around his inconsistency when it comes to these claims that he makes. He's completely unfair most of the times, and you will see that most of the things that he says, he doesn't apply them even in his own life. I mean, we would understand if he was like a Bishop Mabonga or someone who was saying, let's go back to African spirituality. No, he's basically just pulling people away from Christianity. That's his number one goal. The end goal is not necessarily to bring you back to African spirituality, because he's not practicing it himself. So let's have a look at this video, and then we're going to give some reaction after.
You cannot be Zulu and Christian, both. You cannot be Zulu and Christian, both. And of course, a lot of people came in and like, what do you mean? I know a lot of Zulu people who are Christian, what? Sure, whatever. And then some people would reference the Shembe Church, which would be one of the marriages of Zulu culture and the Christian church, Isonto Lama Nazareth or Shembe. So you cannot be both Zulu and Christian. You have to pick one. You cannot be Xhosa and Muslim. You have to pick one. You cannot be Sotho and Jewish. Until Africans in particular, I'll say that because I'm African, realize that you cannot be both these things. We are going to remain confused and keep trying to intermarry things that should not be intertwined at all. You need to pick a struggle. Now, does this mean that religion and culture is static? No. I've already explained that Christianity would borrow from paganism. Of course, some of what we call Zulu today, Ilobolo, now has money, which was not a concept that we used at the time, and many other things. Imgidi, when you go to them, the way they set up now have been very westernized. You can borrow, but you must stick to one, and you must understand the essence and what you're trying to achieve. And if you want to change, evolve, improve the diet, change, evolve the dress, the clothing, the wear, if you want to evolve the language, and you're free to do that, but you understand that this is who and what I am. This is my religion and my culture and my being and my belief. This is my beginning. And when you look at the research of, I'm going to stick to one example just for ease. When you look at the history of the Zulu nation, Ushaka Zulu, Shaka Kasenza Ngakhona, would create a kingdom, consolidate a kingdom, which we would know as the Zulus today. But he would come from a smaller clan. Yes, they called themselves AmaZulu, the people of the heavens, with his father, Senza Ngakhona, Uchama, all the way to uZulu, Umalandela, etc. There would be other groups, Omthetwa, Ondwandwe, Oxaba, etc. There would be other groups there as well. Shaka consolidated these people. They became known as AmaZulu, and then they carried on moving forward. When you tell me today that I was born Zulu, it does not mean in your blood you are related to Shaka Kasenza Ngakhona. You could be. But there's a small chance, because the vast majority of that nation was actually people that were not blood related to. You cannot be Zulu and Christian. Both. You cannot be Xhosa and Christian.
I want to address the first logical fallacy that I see, or this contradiction that I'm seeing in his argument. In the first 10 minutes of the video, Penuel makes the claim that Judaism is a culture, Islam is a culture, Christianity is a culture, and Zulu is a culture. And then he says that Zulu people had their own culture before Christianity came. African people had their own gods before white people came. He even says we had our own clothes, we had our own way of living. So he's basically saying that all of these things amount to culture. So what we call Christianity, he even makes the claim that Christianity is borrowed from pagan culture. And then goes on then to drive that point away to say, if you are converting to one and leaving the other, you are actually embracing the culture and then rejecting your own culture. Now, this would have been true if Penuel didn't go on towards the end of his video and then define what it means to be Zulu. He says, people who are Zulu today are Zulu because over a period of time, the people who conquered all of KZN were actually a small Zulu family. And so that being a small Zulu family means that the culture originated from one particular point, one particular family. So this family conquered other families that were not Zulu. And then in so conquering them, they converted them from their cultures into Zulu culture. So there we have a problem straight away. That what about those people's culture? What about their cosmologies? What about their ways of living? Those people had to let go of their ways of culture in order to embrace this so-called new Zulu culture, which was actually a culture of one family that was now imposed to the rest of the people who were living in what is now KZN. So if it's okay for people, and Penuel is a Zulu person himself, probably from all the way in Newcastle, if Penuel can call himself Zulu, and yet the people who lived in Newcastle before they were conquered by the family of Ushaka Zulu and incorporated into the kingdom, there was another culture they were practicing. There was another even language that they were using. There was even other ways of living that they were practicing. Why doesn't he say, no, we are not Zulu, we must go back to being Omtembu or Omtetwa or whatever it was, the cultures that were there, that were conquered by Ushaka Zulu. So there's no problem when someone converts from another culture into becoming Zulu, but there's a problem. If Christianity is a culture, there's a problem with someone leaving the Zulu culture and embracing the Christian culture. Again, you see that there's major flaws in his logic, because on one side, people become Zulu through adoption, through conquest, and through cultural exchange. Those were the three ways that people became Zulu. It's not like they were born Zulu, and he agrees that you cannot be born Zulu. So why can't people adopt Christianity? Right? There are some people who will say people have become Christian because of colonization. Well, there are people who have become Zulu because of colonization, right? There are people who have been conquered by Ushaka Zulu, and then they had to believe in Zulu cosmology. They had to believe in Umvelingang. But what did they believe in? They had their own ways. They had their own gods. What happened to their gods? And is it okay for those people to drop them? Even the people that Penuel is a descendant of. And then number three, there's also a cultural exchange. Now, this one is very important because people are always borrowing from each other. And Penuel agrees with me that culture is not static. There is circumcision that I always go back to say, at some point, circumcision was part of Zulu culture, or initiation, because they practice circumcision, but they go to the hospital and it's done through the department and so on. But at some point, it was Zulu culture for boys to go to the mountain and to get circumcised. And yet Shaka Zulu decided that this will no longer be part of their culture. So this means that it's okay for us to say, we no longer want this culture, we want to adopt another particular culture. And there are many things that humanity has borrowed from each other. And we borrow things that work, right? When we look at the world as it is today, it's not the same as what the world was back in the days. This is why, for me, Christianity comes in and becomes so helpful for the African, because we grow up, having the fear of inkanyamba, which is basically like a water snake that causes destruction. Some people believe that when there's a tornado, that this is inkanyamba. There is also what we used to call inyikima, which is basically when there's an earthquake, people believed that there was a massive snake that was under the ground, and that snake would then be turning, maybe it's now time for the snake to go to bed, and so now he's going to shake the whole world. That was part of our culture. That was part of our belief. That was part of our cosmology. But Christianity came, and even with the development of science, we came to know that an earthquake happens when there are the plates of the earth, tectonic plates that are shifting underneath. There's no a snake that's twisting and turning. But now what Penuel is saying is, no, we had that belief. That belief was part of our culture. Let us not embrace the more scientific belief that tells us that actually these are just plates that are shifting, that there's no such snake that's underneath that's twisting and turning. And so, again, should we then hold on to those beliefs maybe that were not based on science, not based on information about God? Even when we're talking about the stars, right? We grew up not understanding what the stars were. We even venerated the stars. We even worshiped the sun. But after there has been so much development in science, we know that the sun is just one out of billions and trillions of stars. But growing up, people grew up believing that these things were supreme beings, that when there was lightning, that the gods were angry, right? So these are things that Christianity has helped us to come out of all these superstitions that make us so afraid of the supernatural, so afraid of even just natural things that are there in the world. Again, I want to come back to the hypocrisy of Penuel, and I'm sorry to call him a hypocrite, but this is because this is exactly what he does. You cannot be a Zulu and Christian, and yet he is Zulu and atheist. Why is he not Zulu and believe in Mvelinqangi, and Zulu and believe, in Kamata and all these things that he was listing? Why is he embracing a Western view of God, believing that there is no God? Because you cannot trace anywhere in Zulu culture or belief or practice or cosmology where people believe that there was no God. You can't. So where does he then get the right to be Zulu and atheist, but other people can't be Christian theists? So he can adopt a Western idea of atheism and then bring it and merge it with his Zulu culture or his Zulu identity. And yet people cannot be Christian and Zulu at the same time. But if Christianity is a culture and Zulu is a culture, and Zulu was a culture that was imposed via conquest, via cultural exchange, via adoption, why can't people adopt Christianity if they see that Christianity is true? So these are some of the problems for me that you find in the arguments of Penuel. I want to read something to you on the day that Christianity was founded and born. Always go back to Acts chapter 2, verse 10, the day of Pentecost. The Holy Spirit comes down upon the church. They begin to speak in tongues. They begin to speak in different known languages. And we're told in Acts chapter 2, verse 10, that there were visitors who came from Rome, and both Jews and converts to Judaism. There were Cretans, there were Arabs, and we're told that they heard them declaring the wonders of God in their own tongues. And so if you look at that verse very carefully, you see that there were Africans who were there. And Christianity began to spread from there, so that even when Christianity or when Paul arrives in Rome to preach the gospel, that the people who came on the day of Pentecost heard the gospel in their language, went back and told other people, and this is how the Romans came to know the Lord. But even the people who were Arabs were there. The Cretans were there. If you read further on the verse, we also told that there were people from Libya who were there. So Africans were there from day one and adopted Christianity. But even more powerful than that is that there were Jews there. And he mentioned that Judaism is a culture, right? There we're seeing that Jews were the first ones to adopt Christianity and abandon their culture. If they are abandoning their culture, they abandon their culture, right? They abandoned their culture, taking from his definition, they abandoned their culture and adopted Christianity. The same as people from Rome, the same as people who are Arabs. Anyone who comes to submit themselves to Christ, whether you are a Jew, whether you are an Arab, whether you are from Rome, if Christianity is a culture, then all of us must abandon our cultures in order to embrace Christianity. Because why must Christianity be cheap for the African? And then for someone who turns from Islam, that person is going to either be executed, they're either going to be rejected by their families, they're either going to change even the way that they dress, of which the Bible doesn't say we must change how we dress, by the way. You can still dress like an Arab and still be a Christian at the same time. But what I'm trying to say is that there are things that you're going to have to let go of. And it is no different for those who are in Africa. It is no different for Zulu people. If Christianity is a culture, and then that means that all of us must abandon our cultures in order to embrace Christianity. Because Christianity is founded on the premise that there is one God and that there is ultimate truth. That this means that if something is true, it's true for all people, right? Christianity is founded on those things. So number one, if there's one God, then he must be God for all of us. So there's no God of the Zulu, there's no God of the Xhosa, unless the Zulu is saying that there is a different God for Zulu people and there's a different God for European people or Asian people, which then brings so many questions into play, because then who created the Zulus? Was it only the Zulu God, but he didn't create the Asian, the European? Is he God if he only creates this particular group of people, but doesn't create another group of people? And how do these gods relate to each other? Are they equally powerful? And if they're equally powerful, this means that they must be in some form of union with each other. So there's so many questions that arise from these things. And if there's one God, obviously, there must be one way. And that's what Christianity is saying, is that if all of us were created by one God, then there must be one way to that God. And therefore, we can't have a Zulu God, we can't have a Xhosa God, we can't have an Asian God. If there's one God, there must be one way. And that's what Christianity is saying, is that if all of us were created by one God, then there must be one way to that God.